No one on Earth had expected first contact to begin with laughter. The transmission arrived at exactly 9:14 Universal Time Coordinated, interrupting broadcasts, halting financial markets, and silencing every major network on the planet. For 13 breathless seconds, the screens showed only static wrapped around a strange silver crest. Then the image sharpened, and for the first time in human history, the people of Earth looked upon an alien ruler. He sat on a throne so large it seemed carved for a giant, framed by dark banners and a line of armored guards. His face was narrow, almost elegant, with eyes like polished stone and a crown of black metal rising above his brow. He did not look monstrous. He looked regal. That, somehow, made his words worse. "So," he began, his voice translated instantly by systems no one could explain, "this is humanity." In New York, crowds gathered beneath giant billboards to watch. In Lagos, cafes turned up the volume. In Delhi, children stared through shop windows while traffic slowed to a crawl. Across every nation, every language, every border, humanity listened together. The alien king leaned forward with open amusement. "You poison your own skies. You divide yourselves into tribes and flags. You bicker endlessly over land, belief, and pride." His thin smile widened. "And yet your scattered signals dared reach beyond your world, as if you believed yourselves worthy of the stars." A murmur swept across Earth. Not panic, not yet, but disbelief. At the United Nations Emergency Chamber, no one spoke for several long seconds. Diplomats who had spent careers preparing for every possible conflict sat frozen, staring at the live feed. Advisors exchanged hurried notes. Translators checked systems already proven flawless. On the screen, the king rose from his throne. "You are not a civilization," he declared. "You are an argument that learned to walk upright." Behind him, his court erupted in cold, theatrical laughter. In homes and offices around the globe, human faces hardened. Some looked angry, some ashamed, some simply stunned. The insult struck deeper because parts of it were familiar. Humanity had always known its flaws. It was one thing to wrestle with them from within. It was another to hear them recited like a verdict from the stars. The king raised one hand, and the laughter ceased. "Be grateful," he said. "My empire is merciful. Kneel, and you may keep your oceans, your cities, and your little customs. Resist, and your world will be brought to order." The transmission ended as abruptly as it began. For a moment, Earth fell silent. Then the noise came all at once. News anchors talked over one another. Military hotlines lit up. Satellites shifted. Protests formed before anyone even knew what they were protesting. Some demanded surrender. Some demanded retaliation. Some demanded proof that any of it was real. But beneath the chaos, something older stirred. Not rage alone. Not fear alone. Resolve. In bunkers, war rooms, research labs, and crowded apartment kitchens, the same thought took root. Humanity had been measured in a single glance and found unworthy. That would be remembered. By sunset, representatives from nations that had barely shared a room in peace were seated at the same table. Rival powers exchanged intelligence without delay. Scientists who had spent decades competing now spoke as colleagues. Fleets were recalled. Defenses were activated. Deep in classified facilities, projects long buried under political deadlock were unlocked with unanimous approval. Humanity, insulted before the stars, did what it had always done when cornered. It adapted. And somewhere far above Earth, beyond the moon and hidden in the dark, the ships of the alien empire waited patiently. They believed they had introduced themselves with strength. They did not yet understand what they had truly done. They had made humanity listen together. And for the first time in history, that was far more dangerous than any weapon. The 24 hours after the Alien King's broadcast became known as the Long Day. No one slept. Not really. Cities stayed awake beneath glowing towers and endless news coverage. Fighter jets crossed midnight skies. Naval fleets shifted into defensive positions. Schools closed. Markets froze. In hospitals, factories, offices, and homes, people kept glancing upward, as if expecting the stars themselves to move. And in every capital on Earth, one question consumed the leaders of mankind. What now? By dawn, the answer came from the last place anyone expected: unity. Inside a heavily secured chamber beneath Geneva, delegates from nearly every nation on Earth gathered around a circular table. Rivals sat shoulder to shoulder. Old enemies exchanged folders, codes, satellite maps, and decades of hidden research. There was no room left for pride. Whatever differences humanity had, they had all just been placed in the same category by an empire beyond the sky. Weak. Disposable. Conquerable. Secretary-General Elena Voss stood before the chamber, exhaustion visible in her eyes but not in her voice. "We answer once," she said, clearly, peacefully, and together. No one argued. Within hours, every major station, every satellite relay, and every deep space transmitter on Earth focused on a single outgoing message. It was sent in hundreds of languages, then translated into machine patterns, mathematical constants, and visual codes designed for any intelligence capable of reaching the stars. When the Alien King finally received humanity's reply, the entire world watched. The screen lit once more with the silver crest of the Empire. But this time, instead of the throne room, the galaxy saw Earth. Not one nation. Not one flag. Earth. The transmission opened with images of oceans, deserts, forests, and cities. It showed children in classrooms, farmers in the fields, surgeons in operating rooms, engineers at launch sites, rescue workers pulling strangers from disaster zones, and ordinary people helping one another in countless quiet ways. Then Elena Voss appeared at the center of the screen. She stood at a plain podium, wearing no crown and no jewels. "Your Majesty," she began, her voice steady, "you judged us in a single speech. You saw our conflicts, but not our compassion. You saw our divisions, but not our determination to overcome them. Across Earth, millions listened in complete silence. We will not kneel," she continued, "but neither do we seek war. Humanity offers dialogue, mutual respect, and peaceful contact. Withdraw your threat, and history will remember this as the moment two civilizations chose wisdom over conquest." Behind her appeared a simple line in dozens of languages: "Peace is still possible." Then her expression hardened just enough. "But understand this clearly. Restraint is not surrender. Patience is not weakness. If you come to our world in violence, every nation of Earth will stand together." The message ended there, short, direct, unmistakable. For 6 minutes, there was no response. Then the alien feed returned. The king sat once again upon his vast throne, fingers drumming against the armrest. Around him stood his generals and nobles, their faces already twisted with amusement. He listened to the human message in full without interruption. When it ended, he tilted his head. Then he laughed. Not loudly, not wildly, just a quiet, cruel laugh that spread through his court like disease. One by one, the nobles joined him. Even the armored commanders grinned. "A warning," the king said at last. From them, his court erupted. He rose slowly, looking almost delighted. "How extraordinary," he said. "The little world has found its voice." His eyes narrowed like blades. "Then let it speak while it still exists." The transmission cut. Above Mars' orbit, long-range telescopes caught the first undeniable movement of the alien fleet. Massive warships turned in perfect formation, their drives burning cold blue against the dark. On Earth, alarms began to sound. Humanity had offered peace. The Empire had answered with laughter. And now, at last, both sides understood that the next message would not be sent with words. The alien empire entered the Sol system like it was attending a ceremony. Their warships came in perfect formation, black and silver hulls gleaming under distant sunlight, engines burning with cold precision. They did not rush. They did not scatter. They advanced with the confidence of a power that had crushed worlds before and expected Earth to become just another entry in its history. From the bridge of the flagship Verex, High Marshal Tolek studied the blue planet on his tactical display and felt only mild disappointment. "So this is the defiant world," he said. Beneath him, officers adjusted positions, scanned orbital defenses, and projected casualty estimates so one-sided they barely seemed worth reading. Earth had satellites, missiles, aircraft, submarines, and countless ground forces, but all of it belonged to a species still confined to one world. Against an interstellar empire, what could that possibly matter? "Resistance will collapse within hours," one officer reported. Tolek nodded. "Take their orbital grid first. Then disable communications. Their governments will fracture by sunset." It was a reasonable plan. It was also the first mistake. The Empire opened the battle with a coordinated strike aimed at Earth's defense satellites. Beams of white energy lanced through orbit, precise and devastating. Several platforms vanished instantly. But the rest did not die. They moved. Thousands of objects that the alien fleet had dismissed as debris, junk, and dead hardware suddenly altered course. Defunct satellites awakened. Retired stations split apart into clouds of guided fragments. Civilian cargo platforms ignited hidden drives. What had looked like a cluttered and disorganized orbital shell became, in seconds, a layered defense web. On screens across the alien fleet, threat markers multiplied too fast to count. "What is this?" Tolek snapped. A human answer came in the form of impact. Kinetic drones slammed into the lead destroyers at impossible speeds. Communications arrays shattered. Sensor ships went dark. One cruiser lost half its engine ring to what had, moments earlier, appeared to be an abandoned weather satellite. Earth orbit, messy and overcrowded for generations, had been transformed into a battlefield only humans could have designed. Chaotic, improvised, and brutally effective. "Recalculate," shouted an officer. But there was no time. From the surface below, retaliation began. Missiles rose from deserts, mountains, forests, and hidden ocean platforms. They came in swarms, not to overwhelm shields directly, but to force maneuvers, split formations, and herd the invaders into kill zones. Fighter craft launched in numbers so reckless the alien commanders first assumed desperation. Then they realized the humans were coordinating everything. Military networks that should have been crippled were still functioning through redundancies buried under oceans, beneath bedrock, and inside mobile systems constantly changing position. Nations the aliens had assumed would argue, delay, or betray one another were instead fighting as if they had trained for this all their lives. In a way, they had. 4 centuries humanity had prepared for war against itself. Wasteful, tragic, endless. Now all that terrible experience had found a single direction. The second alien mistake was believing fear would break human morale. Instead, the invasion erased old divisions faster than any treaty in history. Cities under threat did not descend into surrender. They organized. Civilian engineers became defense crews. Truck drivers carried supplies under bombardment. Hackers, pilots, factory workers, and doctors all became part of the same machine. Every loss made Earth angrier. Every strike taught them more. Every hour the aliens failed to win gave humanity time to adapt. And adaptation was the one weapon the Empire had underestimated most. By the third day, the invaders still held superior firepower. By the third day, they had also lost the certainty of victory. Marshal Tolek stared at the burning wrecks drifting across orbit and felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Not confusion. Not yet panic. Respect. These were not supposed to fight like this, he muttered. But humanity had never been what the king thought. They were not orderly. They were not elegant. They were not easy to rule. They were stubborn, inventive, and impossible to frighten once cornered. The Empire had come expecting conquest. Instead, it had found a world that turned survival into strategy, and the war they thought would end in hours had only just begun. By the 19th day of the war, the alien empire no longer looked invincible. The change was not sudden. No single battle shattered them. No dramatic explosion marked the exact moment their confidence failed. Instead, it happened the way great powers often collapse, one miscalculation at a time, one broken assumption after another, until the weight of certainty gave way beneath them. Their fleet still filled the dark above Earth. Their weapons were still stronger. Their ships were still built for conquest. But now they hesitated, and humanity noticed. In command centers across Earth, the reports all told the same story. Alien formations were tightening defensively. Their outer patrols had thinned. Supply relays were pulling farther back. Intercepted communications, pieced together by linguists and machine learning systems working without sleep, revealed what human commanders had begun to suspect. The Empire had never planned for a prolonged war. They had arrived expecting surrender, not resistance. They had packed terror, not endurance. Their strategy depended on a fast collapse of human leadership, a panicked civilian population, and a divided world too frightened to coordinate. Instead, they found the opposite. Now it was Earth making calculations. General Isaac Moreno stood before the Multinational Defense Council, a wall of holographic projections spinning behind him. "They still think in hierarchies," he said. "Everything flows downward. Orders, authority, control. Their fleet reacts quickly, but only when command remains intact. Break the chain at the top, and their entire structure stumbles." Around the table, leaders and commanders studied the central image, the Imperial flagship. It dwarfed every other vessel in the alien fleet, a floating palace of black armor and silver light. Deep scans suggested layered shields, internal hangars, command spires, and the unmistakable energy signature of a royal core chamber. The king was aboard. For a long moment, no one spoke. Everyone understood what that meant. Not assassination. Not vengeance. Decapitation of command. "If we isolate the flagship," Moreno continued, "we can force confusion through their fleet, capture their ruler, and this war ends faster than it began." It was an impossible plan, which, by then, made it a human plan. The operation was launched under the cover of the largest coordinated counterattack in history. Across orbit, human forces struck in waves. Missiles, drones, stealth craft, decoy swarms, sabotage codes, and even repurposed mining platforms turned into battering rams. The goal was not to destroy the fleet outright. It was to blind it. And for 11 brutal minutes, it worked. Alien destroyers turned to meet false threats. Cruisers broke formation. Sensor grids overloaded beneath storms of conflicting signals. The flagship's shield envelope flickered under relentless pressure from every direction. Then the breach team went in. They were not the strongest soldiers Earth had. They were the most adaptable, operators from different nations, different doctrines, different languages, trained together only after the war began. On paper, they should not have functioned as a single unit. In practice, they were exactly what the Empire could not predict. Their craft struck the underside of the flagship like a shard of metal thrown by a guard. Hull charges punched an opening. Gravity alarms failed. Corridors sealed too slowly. Within seconds, human troops were inside. The fighting was fierce, fast, and disorienting. The flagship had been built to impress subjects, not repel enemies who moved like desperation made disciplined. Human teams advanced through smoke, sparks, and shifting gravity, bypassing heavily guarded halls and cutting through maintenance routes their engineers had guessed must exist. They were right. At the heart of the vessel, beyond 2 final security doors, they found the throne chamber. The king was still there, not fleeing, not hiding, waiting. He stood before his throne in dark ceremonial armor, tall and composed despite the chaos trembling through his ship. Around him lay the last of his royal guard, some wounded, some already disarmed, all defeated. For a second, the room held still. The alien king looked at the humans with something colder than anger. "You," he said quietly, "were supposed to kneel." Captain Mora Ilian stepped forward, visor cracked, uniform scorched, rifle steady but lowered. "You should have taken the peace offer." The king said nothing after that. Outside, across the fleet, the Imperial command signal vanished. And in that silence, for the first time since the war began, the Empire understood its throne had fallen. The war ended not with an explosion, but with a broadcast. Every surviving alien warship received the same message at the same moment. The Imperial flagship was under human control, the king was in custody, and all hostile actions were to cease immediately. For several long minutes, the fleet held its breath in silence. Then, one by one, the alien vessels powered down their main weapons. Across Earth, people watched the impossible unfold. Cities that had spent weeks under the shadow of annihilation now stood in stunned quiet. Sirens faded. Anti-orbital batteries cooled. In command bunkers and field hospitals, aboard carriers and inside ruined apartment blocks, men and women stared at their screens as if afraid the image might vanish. Humanity had not just survived. Humanity had won. But victory brought a dangerous question with it. What came next? Some demanded revenge. Some wanted trials. Some wanted the alien king hidden away forever, erased from history as completely as possible. But Earth's leaders understood something deeper. The Empire had ruled through spectacle. It had conquered by making entire worlds witness their own helplessness. If this war was truly over, then the final message could not be whispered behind closed doors. It had to be seen. 3 days later, under a sky finally free of enemy ships, the king of the Empire was brought to Earth's provisional peace capital in Geneva. Security was overwhelming, but the streets were full, not with rioting crowds, not with chaos, but with people who had come to witness the end of fear. They lined the roads in silence. The alien king walked at the center of a guarded procession, no throne beneath him now, no banners trailing behind, no court laughing at his back. His ceremonial armor had been stripped away and replaced with plain restraint garments marked only with the insignia of a detained head of state. He was not beaten. He was not displayed as an animal. He was made to do something he had never imagined. He was made to walk among those he had called weak. From balconies, windows, rooftops, and barricades, humanity watched him pass. A nurse with a bandaged arm, a mechanic still in oil-stained coveralls, a child sitting on her father's shoulders, too young to understand all of it, but old enough to know this moment mattered. Soldiers stood at attention beside civilians. Leaders stood without crowns. No one bowed. The king kept his eyes forward at first, his posture rigid with wounded pride. But the silence unsettled him more than any shout could have. He had expected rage. He had expected chaos. He had expected humanity, at its moment of triumph, to become the savage thing he had always believed it to be. Instead, they gave him order, dignity, judgment. At the steps of the International Assembly Hall, the procession halted. Cameras from every nation, and every surrendered alien vessel still in orbit, focused on the same image, the conqueror who had promised Earth obedience now standing unarmed before the world he failed to break. Secretary-General Elena Voss stepped to the podium. "This is not a parade of cruelty," she said, her voice carrying over the square. "This is the end of tyranny. Let every world that feared this empire see what happened here. Power without respect collapses. Arrogance without wisdom falls. And those who mistake compassion for weakness will learn, as he did, that mercy does not mean surrender." She turned slightly, looking toward the captured king. "Humanity offered peace before the war. We offered justice after it." For the first time since his first broadcast, the alien king lowered his head. Not to a throne, not to an empire, but to a truth he could no longer deny. The streets had not witnessed his humiliation. They had witnessed the fall of his certainty. And as the square erupted, not in hatred, but in relieved, thunderous applause, the message traveled far beyond Earth. Humanity had been mocked, threatened, and tested, and humanity had endured.